Hello and welcome back to Bookish. This may be the goofiest, most naive, silliest video that I ever made. But if you watch my channel and you look at my playlist and you look back at my past videos, you will notice that I don't shy away from political topics, that I have made my feelings about political issues involving things from structural racism to the presidency of Donald Trump and the future of the United States. I've made my opinions there clear, and that I have stated several times, as I will now, that I intend to use my channel for however many people it reaches in the hopes of spreading a message that, in my opinion, gets the United States, the world, whoever, back on track and thinking right. So oftentimes I find myself despairing about the state of politics in the United States of America and the future of the United States. And I'm in one of those periods again right now. And so I've been thinking quite a bit about what our problem is in the United States, because that's where I live, and that's the country I know the most about. So this is mostly about the United States. What is our problem? Why do a group of people who not that long ago were motivated by a statement that said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, to conquer what seemed to be and to participate in an effort to defeat what seemed to be an incredibly powerful enemy on the world stage, can then go from that to electing and maintaining the popularity of a president, a politician whose entire point of view is self-centeredness and an individual desire for power. How do we go from one of those things to another? Regardless of whether or not we think, we can go back and poke holes in Franklin Delano Roosevelt and anybody else in history, which is why we really shouldn't, have hero worship, because it leads to this kind of problem. But I don't think there's any doubt that we've taken a step in the wrong direction. So in thinking about this, what I was thinking is that really what we're seeing in the United States, and maybe in other places around the world today, is kind of the triumph of individualism, and that we have swung too far in the direction of individualism and too far away from collectivism. Maybe what divides us is not liberal conservative, however we frame that in our own countries, however that comes out, but this kind of contest between individualism and collectivism. In the United States, we have a myth of individualism. The United States was founded by individuals who did great things, and we revere individuals from American history, and we hold them up as examples of what people should do. And we're convinced that here in the United States, any one person should be able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps through individual effort and individual genius. And the truth of the matter is, there are very few examples of that in American history. Perhaps Alexander Hamilton, even though their good marriage probably paid off for him more than anything else he did. I think Andrew Carnegie would be an example of that, somebody who actually went from real poverty to massive wealth. But the truth of the matter is, this nation wasn't founded by individuals for individuals. It was for the most part founded and succeeded through collective action. Whether we want to talk about the Pilgrims signing the Mayflower Compact, which bound them to collective action, whether we want to talk about the Massachusetts Bay Colony, who were committed to collective action based on their Puritan beliefs, whether we want to talk about the colony of Pennsylvania, founded on Quaker beliefs and William Penn, whether we want to talk about the initial stages at Jamestown, where initially those colonists who arrived at Jamestown were behaving individually ultimately a disaster, which almost doomed the colony, and until they were forced to take action collectively, the future of the Jamestown colony was in real danger. It's collectively that we ended slavery. Americans collectively rose up to end slavery. It's collectively that Americans participated in a worldwide effort to defeat fascism and to expand human rights. It's collectively that Americans, led by African Americans, expanded civil rights and eliminated Jim Crow in the 1960s. It's collectively through our government and our taxpayer monies that the United States funds medical research, which cures disease or provides immunization to prevent diseases. So, to me, we should celebrate our collective actions, and the proof of that is in the language of our founding documents. The Declaration of Independence isn't Jefferson saying, I hold these truths to be self-evident, and therefore this is what we should do because I say so. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident. The Constitution begins with the words, we the people, we collectively give our consent to the creation of this government. And despite what anyone will tell you, we still, however tenuously right now, still hold the reins of power, that our government does still govern through our consent. And to be honest with you, if in the United States the government stops governing through our consent, it will be because we voted to elect the government stop governing through our consent by re-electing Donald Trump or Trump's minions or one of Trump's minions to power. That will be the case. But, I thought I could give this long history lesson, which I just did anyway. Or maybe I could relate it to something else, which is more booktube-ish. And so, the first thing I thought about in what it is, in terms of the titanic struggle between good and evil, in my mind, the first thing I thought about was, I'm sorry, Zelda's fixing to bark out the door. The first thing I thought about was The Lord of the Rings. Because The Lord of the Rings really is a story about good versus evil. So I thought I would put that in the context of this kind of American political situation, individualism versus collectivism, and kind of talk about perhaps how we could learn lessons from The Lord of the Rings, apply those to our thinking, and maybe that would be a way to break through in these areas. So let's just begin with the fact that Lord of the Rings is about the Ring of Power. The Ring of Power represents the ultimate power to control Middle-earth, the world in which the Lord of the Rings is set. The Ring of Power was created specifically by Sauron to give him that power, and Sauron is the ultimate evil, and his desire to get that ring back so he can achieve that power is so that he can have dominion over Middle-earth, that he can rule Middle-earth through force and fear and terrorism and pain and violence. That's what he wants because Sauron is evil. So there's a real equation here that Tolkien is making between power and evil. And, we all know the quote, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that there is this connection between the power and the ability to do evil. And that certainly affects characters in the book. There are various times throughout the Lord of the Rings cycle, there are characters who desire, want, temporarily possess the ring, beginning with Gollum. Gollum wants the ring. He calls it my precious. It allows him to live a longer life. It allows him to have a certain amount of power. Now, since Gollum is a small creature, the amount of power he can wield with that is small, but he still wants it. And he wants it not for some kind of collective action, not for some larger purpose. He wants it for himself. Moving on then, and thinking about other characters who at various points in time seem to want the ring. Probably chief among them, other than Sauron himself, is Saruman. Saruman becomes kind of, trapped and kind of caught up in this desire to possess the ring, to gain power, to become this powerful individual. And he lets that, twist him and change him, and to compromise all the things that he was supposed to do, as a wizard and as the leader of the Wizarding Council in Middle-earth. He becomes corrupted by the ring, and he wants the ring for his own power. In other ways, other characters are kind of minorly affected by a desire for the ring, whether it's Boromir or his father Denethor, who may want the ring for himself and to protect Gondor, but we know that eventually it will become this kind of corrupting influence. And those people, those characters are for, more or less the bad guys in the Lord of the Rings story. Gollum, Saruman, and Sauron are the bad guys in the Lord of the Rings story, and what they want is power, and the ring represents that. In contrast to that, Tolkien gives us numerous examples of characters who come in contact with the ring and have a chance to gain power, but choose not to. And they are the good guys because they choose not to. These can be people like Bilbo, who, Gandalf says, that Bilbo may be the first person to give up the ring voluntarily, not to have it taken from him. In part, this is because what Bilbo wants is not anything that has to do with power, and that allows him to give up the ring. Samwise Gamgee briefly possesses the ring, and then he gives it back to Frodo. He gives it up. Frodo is the ultimate example of someone who possesses the ring for a long period of time and bears that burden, and ultimately, is responsible for the destruction of the ring because, even though at the end he wants for himself and the ring takes power over him, but because he's doing all that because he believes it's the right thing to do for Middle-earth collectively. Think about the burden that Frodo takes on. He takes on this burden of having this thing, of destroying this thing of absolute power, which he knows is likely to kill him and likely to be unsuccessful, and he faces insurmountable odds, but he does it because he wants to do something for the good of everybody, because he is motivated to do something for the good of everybody, whether we're just talking about the Shire or Middle-earth in general. Other people in the Lord of the Rings cycle also have their brief moments with the ring. You know, Tom Bombadil, that mysterious figure that they meet outside the Old Forest on their way to Bree, has the ring in his hand, and it's of no interest to him because that kind of power doesn't interest Tom Bombadil. Both Galadriel and Gandalf have an opportunity to take the ring, and they both, you know, would use the ring for good, but they also know that in their hands the ring would be too powerful, the ring would make them too powerful, and that would corrupt them and turn them to evil. And so these people, these good guys, represent the kind of people we in the United States used to think of as heroes, as possessing American values. You know, they were willing to sacrifice for the good of others. Think about how we revere in the United States our military people, and how we celebrate Veterans Day, and all the things we have to do, all the things we say and do to support veterans in the United States. That's because veterans sacrifice part of their time, their lives, and sometimes their actual lives in service to the United States. We feel the same way about other selfless people sometimes in the United States, like firemen and teachers. You know, that these people are worthy of praise and worthy of, you know, reverence because they do something to help the community. That's the kind of hero that we used to like in the United States of America. Even our political heroes, you know, George Washington was known as the American Cincinnatus because, like the Roman Cincinnatus, he essentially turned down an opportunity to have absolute power. Think of Dwight Eisenhower during, you know, after World War II and his popularity, and how when he was president of the United States, he willingly, when he got to the end of his eight years of president, much like Washington did, stepped aside and let others take power. As a matter of fact, every president of the United States has done that, willingly, you know, surrendered power when they lost an election, followed the will of the people, respected the constitutional laws of the United States, until Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was motivated by a desire for power. He wanted power for himself. He said, "I alone can fix this." He believed that his presidency and himself was more important to the nation. And it used to be that we rejected people like that. We rejected people who wanted to become like Sauron or like Saruman. That those people were people that we rejected. So one of the things I think is really important, and maybe this would be kind of, you know, in my naive way, self-aggrandizing way, maybe I think this would be a wake-up call, is to look at the similarities between Sauron and Saruman and Trump and how they operated. First, I would just have you note, and this is the kind of as an aside, that because all three of these people, Sauron, Saruman, and Trump, are motivated by self-interest, they don't care what happens to the world. And so the worlds in which they live, the places they live, become desolated. You know, Mordor is a land of fire and ash and smoke where essentially nothing grows and nothing can live. Saruman turns Isengard from this kind of lush, you know, river valley area into, you know, a place that resembles Mordor on a small scale, and he even, you know, attacks Fangorn Forest to cut down trees so that he can do more stuff. And we know that Trump had almost no interest in environmental issues, not a believer in climate change, didn't care what happened to the planet because all he's thinking about is himself, just as Sauron was only thinking about power, just as Saruman was only thinking about power, Trump was only thinking about power. All three use propaganda as a way of diminishing opposition, weakening their opposition, and sowing the seeds of division. Think about the effect that Palantir has on Denethor, who is, you know, Boromir's father, and the steward of Gondor, and how either Sauron or Saruman uses that connection to essentially whisper things into the ear of Denethor, which causes him to feel like, you know, Theoden of Rohan has betrayed him, or that Gandalf has turned against him. They use propaganda for divisive purposes, whether it's through the Palantir, which, you know, in my analogy I'm going to compare to the internet and sites like Facebook and others, or whether it's direct propaganda. Think of Grima Wormtongue whispering into the ear of Theoden all the time, making him fearful and weak and preventing him from doing things to stop Saruman from becoming more powerful. You know, you can think of that as, you know, like a Steve Bannon figure, or Fox News, or any of the other news networks which promote kind of Trumpism and Trump ideas. And then finally think about who these leaders in power and who their minions are. You know, both Saruman and Sauron rely on the orcs, who, you know, we're told by Tolkien, the orcs are essentially creatures who are twisted and warped, and the only thing they care about is feeding their own hate and their own destruction and their own desires. You know, Saruman and Sauron aren't promising them anything except the ability to do whatever they want to do, the ability to destroy and hate and commit acts of violence. You know, and if we think about Trump's divisiveness and Trump's appeal to the very worst of his supporters, the white nationalists, the white supremacist organizations, they love him because he allows them to feel justified in their hate, because he empowers that hate, and he essentially promises them directly or indirectly free reign. And we see this where, you know, Saruman and Sauron want attacks on, you know, respectively, Rohan and Gondor, and their minions go and attack those places out of hate and a desire for destruction. And we see the same thing on January the 6th, where Trump and Trump supporters attacked the United States Capitol in an attempt to destroy American democracy, which is one of the things that stood in his way. And they are motivated by this, you know, incredible desire for power, and that power has an evil influence over them, and the people who help empower them are helping to promote these kind of evil things, you know, in the United States, in the sense of evil being anti-democratic, anti-constitutional things. So the other lesson I think that we can draw from the Lord of the Rings related to Trump and Trumpism and individualism versus collectivism is that collectivism is how the forces of evil in the Lord of the Rings are defeated. There is an alliance between men and dwarves and elves and hobbits and eagles and ents and ghosts. An alliance between all these groups that actually brings down the evil forces, which actually destroys evil, which destroys these evil individuals kind of, you know, one at a time, Saruman first and then Sauron, who seek nothing but power. It is through collective action that's done, and that collective action is taken on even without any kind of guarantee of success. One of my favorite lines from the Lord of the Rings movie is Gimli says, you know, possibility of little chance of success, possibility of or certain death, you know, sign me up. That is a statement of belief in taking collective action, not individual action, doing something collectively in an attempt to save something that you find valuable. And oftentimes, you know, I think that's what we should do. We should ignore the forces of hate and division. We should unite across all the lines that divide us, so that not so we have to all agree on everything, that would be ridiculous, but so that we can confront and defeat those things which are literally tearing us apart and literally threaten the things that we love the most. Just as, you know, Frodo and Sam love the Shire, and they do what they do to protect the Shire, we should do what we do to protect the United States or the country we live in from the forces of evil and power and individualism. Now, having said all this, please don't take this the wrong way. Right now, I see that the balance has swung too far in favor of individualism. By the same token, the balance can swing too far in favor of collectivism. Okay, that there is a balance to be maintained, and I'm just arguing that right now we've swung much too far towards individualism. So I'm not advocating an end to individual rights, far from it. What I am suggesting is that when we put the rights of an individual above the safety and health of the community, whether it's an individual claiming the right to own an AR-15 or an individual claiming the right not to get a safe, well-tested vaccination that poses no threat to their health, assuming they don't have health problems that it would pose a threat to, because of individual rights, that we are allowing individualism to put the rest of us in danger. We are allowing individualism to threaten our collective safety, health, security, and future. And the Fellowship of the Ring and Lord of the Rings essentially stood for exactly the opposite. So there you go. I don't know if that made sense. I look forward to your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.